Day Nation, what's going on? Stone Shields on hand once again for another edition of Bengals Breakdown and plenty of exciting stuff to get to on today's show. Of course, we got to talk a little bit of Tee Higgins action per usual. Could he potentially be getting an extension? We got some more reports out there surrounding that news. Also, PFF released their receiving corps rankings a few days ago, so we will see where Cincinnati lands on their list. And also Jermaine Burton. There's a bit of a hype train surrounding the Bengals draft pick this past draft, and we'll certainly dive into all the latest with that and see if he could possibly be a solid wide receiver 3 for the Bengals this year. But before we dive into that, we have our sub battle going on with our Steelers channel, as we have discussed. So the good news is last week we brought this to your attention, and we have made up some ground on the Steelers. The bad news, as you can tell, we are still a little bit behind. So help us out. Do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. We've got you covered all off season long and all season long, of course, as well. So that is youtube.com/BengalsTV. Hit that sub button right now so we can catch those dreaded Pittsburgh Steelers. So as we've talked about a lot on this show, there's been a lot of reports out there. Oh, the Bengals aren't going to extend Tee Higgins. Oh, they might not. ESPN released some more news about that as well, and they had an article that they put out that was the final moves for all 32 teams before camp, and one of their writers said the Bengals extending Tee Higgins. Let's see exactly what Aaron Schatz had to say here. He said, Higgins signed his franchise tag tender Monday, but he is the only tagged player who hasn't signed a long-term extension. He's one of the top number 2 receivers in the league, finishing 14th and receiving DVOA last season. Higgins is an important part of the Bengals offense, and Cincinnati doesn't have the depth at the position to make up for his loss if he leaves after 2024. I want to push back on two things real quickly that Schatz said. Number one, certainly he's the number 2 receiver for the Bengals, but I think across other teams in the league, he would not be a number 2 receiver. And I think that's part of the reason they haven't reached an agreement with him, because he doesn't want to get paid like a number 2 receiver. He wants to get paid like a number 1 receiver. And also going to push back on the comment about the depth. All right, I think the Bengals proved last year specifically that they have depth at that position, and then readdressed it again this year in the draft with, of course, picking Jermaine Burton. And as you can tell, looking at some of Higgins' stats here, last year had some of the injury issues and wasn't out there as much. Still was very productive. But if you look at those stats, in years prior to 2023, especially 21 and 22, that's a receiver that's, borderline wide receiver 1, right? And I think that's obviously what Tee Higgins is looking for in terms of how he gets paid. But I do want to compare him here to Michael Pittman, because there's only one other receiver that got the franchise tag this offseason, and it was Pittman. And he was able to come to an extension with the Indianapolis Colts. As you can see here, it's 3-year extension, $70 million, 46 of that guaranteed, and then he, of course, will get 23.3 of that on average per year. Consider this the floor for Tee Higgins, right, in terms of the extension he wants. He's not going to take anything less than this, and quite frankly, I think he's looking for a lot more than this as well. Of course, it's a good comparison to have because Pittman was drafted in the same class as Higgins. They've been in the league for the same amount of time. And one thing I want to add here is that Tee Higgins is the 2 on the Bengals, and he's looking to get paid like a 1, right? And Michael Pittman, on the other hand, he's the 1 on the Colts right now, but I don't really consider him a wide receiver 1 in the league. And when you take a look at his contract like we just did, I don't think that's really wide receiver 1 money, right? When you look at what else Indianapolis has at that position, with Pearson, obviously they're hoping A.D. Mitchell can, break out for him, the rookie that they just drafted out of Texas. Josh Downs has some upside as well, but they're really looking for, Pittman to be their 1, and they're really not having to pay that much for their wide receiver 1. So, pinned comment of today's video, head down in the comments and get interactive. Will Tee Higgins get extended this offseason? We want to know what you think. Go ahead and type Y if you do believe he will, and type N if you believe he will not. So like we talked about in the open, PFF released some rankings for the receiving corps in the NFL, and they had the Bengals ranked at number 9. Look, lists are fun. I like doing this. It's always good conversation, right? Everybody's got their different opinions. So we're going to dive into their list right here, 1 to 10. And when you take a look at this list, I think the Bengals probably aren't exactly where I think they should be. I think they're getting disrespected a little bit here. But keep in mind, this list includes the entire passing game, right? It's not just wide receivers. It's also taking into account tight ends and running backs that are effective in the passing game. Something I found ironic about this list, actually, is that there's only 3 AFC teams on here, right? And when you think about kind of how the NFL is split in terms of AFC and NFC, I certainly think the AFC is more powerful in terms of the talent that they have. They've got better quarterback play, so I was a little surprised to see that there was only 3 AFC teams on here. And also, I know this isn't a Packers channel, but my biggest takeaway is where's Green Bay on this list? I think what they've got going on with Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Luke Musgrave, of course the addition of Josh Jacobs. I think they should be on this list, and they are not. So we're going to dive into where exactly I think the Bengals should be here in a second. But first, I want to thank our friends at Fanatics. Give them a little shout out here on today's show. Make sure you go get Amarius Mims rookie jerseys. Those are available now. If you take a look at that link below, that is chatsports.com/Amarius Mims. Obviously, a lot of people in Cincinnati super excited to have him in town and think he could really be a hit for Cincinnati. So go show your support for Amarius Mims and go get one of his rookie jerseys from Fanatics. And that link will be in the comments and the description of today's show. So I've got Cincinnati at the 5 spot in that list. They were, of course, at 9. I have them at 5. As far as the top 3 goes with the Niners, the Dolphins, and the Eagles, you can really do what you want with those guys. I think they're the 3 that need to be at that top of that list. How you order them, that's up to you. And like we said, obviously running backs and tight ends are being accounted for. As you can tell why the Niners are up there with McCaffrey and Kittle, right? And, of course, the Eagles being up there as well with Goddard and Saquon Barkley. And, the Rams was a team that they had above the Bengals, and I certainly think, their 2 receivers are elite with Nakua and Kupp, right? But apart from that, I don't think they really have the depth that should put them in a spot above Cincinnati. And I think the depth of the Bengals receiving corps is not being recognized here, right? Someone's going to pop out as a wide receiver 3 for this team. Who that is, we don't know exactly, right? Could be, of course, Jermaine Burton or Andre Yoshivas or, Charlie Jones. Taking a look at the depth chart here for Cincinnati, I think one of those guys is going to break out in a wide receiver 3 role. And I think a lot of people just think it's kind of a 2-horse race with, Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins, and really not getting enough credit at that wide receiver 3 spot. Once again, your chance to get interactive. If you hop down in the comments section, let us know, do you think Cincinnati has a top 5 receiving corps in the National Football League? Type 5 if you believe they do. Type 6 if you believe they do not. Once again, I've got them right at that 5 spot. So really excited to hear what you have to think. Hop down in the comments and let us know. All right, so there have also been some reports out there that Jermaine Burton could be, an eruption candidate for the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, in that wide receiver 3 spot. Look, someone that didn't get drafted in the first round is going to pop, right? Last year we saw it with Puka Nacua. We've seen it with guys in the past like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Of course, A.J. Brown wasn't a first-round pick. Terry McLaurin, just to name a few. Someone's going to pop. And in order for that to happen, you need 2 things. Number 1, a skill set that's going to translate to professional football, obviously. And you can tell that pretty early, right? That's one of the exciting things I like about watching football in the beginning of the year. It's really after just watching a guy in a couple games, you can be like, oh, he can play at this level, or maybe he can't. Because I remember last year with Nacua, I didn't really watch the first couple of those Rams games, and you hear about this kid, and you're like, who is this guy? And then you watch him out there, and you're like, oh, he belongs in the National Football League, and it was a steal for Les Snead and Sean McVay. So someone's going to be like that in this year's NFL draft, of course, as well. Jermaine Burton could be that guy. Taking a look at what Bleacher Report said about Jermaine Burton, they said, the Bengals remain stacked at wide receiver with Tee Higgins back on the franchise tag alongside Jamar Chase. Boyd's slot is now available for the taking, with third-rounder Jermaine Burton being a prime candidate to fill the role. The rookie's adjustment is going rather smoothly as he fits in nicely with this Bengals roster. The potential difference between Boyd and Burton is the latter can provide some more of a vertical threat to open up an already dynamic passing attack even more. Now, he's not going to look anything like Tyler Boyd out there on the football field, right? I think that's something I want to make sure people are noting. And I also think, Boyd's departure doesn't get talked about enough, right? I mean, he was out there for 8 seasons with Cincinnati and really was a focal point of their offense. So someone's going to have to catch all those footballs that he was catching, and Jermaine Burton certainly could be that guy. And taking a look at what he did here in college, had a nice season for Alabama last year, and he really showed up in big games for him. I think, of course, the SEC championship game is really the first game that comes to mind, and he just showed out and really performed really well for Cincinnati. And he's a guy that I think is just going to fit into the AFC North perfectly, right? It's real smash mouth, physical football, and that's exactly what you get with Jermaine Burton. We talked about this on draft night when the Bengals took him. I think him and Jamar Chase are just going to be out there running their mouths and really getting under the skin of, some of those DBs in the AFC North. So I'm really excited to see what he does in his first year, his rookie campaign. And I certainly think Bleacher Report could be onto something as, looking at him as one of those guys that wasn't taken in the first round, but can certainly erupt and look like a first-round player out on the football field. Once again, make sure you are subscribed to our channel here at Bengals Breakdown. Like we talked about, we're in that sub battle with our Steelers channel. We only got about a week left in the month of June, but we're really close. So if you help us out and hit that sub button, I think we can catch Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. So make sure you hit that sub button. That's youtube.com/BengalsTV.